Newt Gingrich discussed Edward Snowden's interview on the Sunday talk shows, and not surprisingly, he's going to come to the defense of the establishment.
Look, the first time there's a major attack in the United States, all the millennials are going to decide they really want the government to protect them. The core idea here, that one person has the right to judge very complex issues more than the commander-in-chief, more than the Congress, more than the Secretary of Defense, is an act of such extraordinary arrogance that it threatens the very fabric of our national security. And people need to understand this is a big deal, and that this guy is dangerous, and the precedent he sets, if we decide it's okay to be a Snowden, then we are really going to have dramatically crippled our capacity.
So where does it go?
So it's arrogant for Snowden to expose government abuse, but it's not arrogant for the government to do the abuse, according to Newt Gingrich. Spying on over 300 million people and claiming they're all suspected terrorists, that's not arrogant? I love how Newt Gingrich can look at that scenario and go, oh, well, obviously the guy who's talking about the abuse, he's the arrogant one. Not the president who knows about the abuse and didn't do dick. Not the NSA who's doing the abuse. Okay? No, it's the guy who exposed the abuse. He's the arrogant one. I can't think of anything more arrogant than claiming that over 300 million Americans are part of a terrorism investigation by default, and they're guilty until proven innocent. So we need to collect all of your information, no matter what you do for a living, no matter the lack of evidence that you've ever done anything related to terrorism in your life. I mean, think about that, man. Your grandma. Did your grandma or your grandpa have anything to do with terrorism ever? You know, for fuck's sake, man, my grandma used to sew and watch Murder, She Wrote on TV and bake apple pies. And you're going to say they're arrogant enough to tell us that, no, we need to collect all of the metadata, all of the information, all of the internet searches. It's all stored in a fucking computer that we could cherry pick whenever we need to discredit people, right? But that's not arrogant. It's not arrogant to do that. It's arrogant to expose that. It's such a wild idea, and it's so gross. And when you think about Newt Gingrich, you need to realize this is a guy who is an authoritarian to his core. So, in other words, his belief system is, shut up, fall in line, you have no rights, listen to your superiors, don't you dare question authority. The NSA says it's right, and they say they need all that information, even though obviously over 300 million Americans are not active in terrorism. That would mean all Americans are active in terrorism. But shut up and know your place and don't question them because they're always right. And then meanwhile, this is the same kind of jackass that will attack the idea of the nanny state. Oh, the nanny state government looking after people. Motherfucker, that's what you're in favor of. You're arrogantly arguing now that, hey, the NSA should collect everybody's information to protect you from any little thing. So you're the nanny statist. Newt Gingrich, man. Now, the one part that he's right is when he says that the second there's an attack, you would see a spike in the polls where people say, okay, NSA spying, I'm for it. In fact, there are already a few polls. Some show that the American people are against it. Others show that they're like, whatever. They have the mindset of, well, if I'm not doing anything wrong, I'm not worried. So he's right about that part, that if there's an attack, all of a sudden people will say, okay, well, go ahead, do whatever you want, take away our liberty, it's fine. But my response to that, Newt, is that's exactly why we have the Fourth Amendment. Do you not understand political science 101? Do you not get what a constitution is? The whole idea of a constitution is, look, everything else is going to be subject to democracy and the opinion of the people, but a constitution is where we lay out your rights. So what that means is these things are off the table. So it doesn't matter if a majority of people agree or disagree, and it doesn't matter what the democratic opinion is. That's the whole purpose of a constitution. So, for example, we could wake up tomorrow and people could say, 72% of people could say, we want to ban the word cunt. But guess what? We have the right to freedom of speech. That's the First Amendment. So the democratic opinion on that issue is irrelevant. It's a right to say whatever you want to say. Okay? And by the same token, he acts like, well, people will want NSA spying. Well, that's nice, but the Fourth Amendment says, quote, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and persons or things to be seized. So in other words, you can say that, well, yeah, the American people will want one warrant to apply to over 300 million people in the NSA to collect all of our information, but the Fourth Amendment prohibits that. You need a particular warrant if law enforcement officials are going to look for information or try to, find somebody guilty of some sort of crime. You can't just use a broad warrant. That's the most obvious violation of the Constitution I've ever seen in my entire life. So it doesn't matter. That's the point, Newt. It doesn't matter that even if there were some sort of conceivable scenario where 95% of the American people say, oh, go ahead and take away our rights. Go ahead, NSA, spy on everything and data mine on everybody. Doesn't matter. It's off the table. It's not negotiable. Remember that old saying, give me liberty or give me death? This is kind of where that applies.